Hello, my name is Marcus Cohen. I'm a senior consultant at DEN, the Dutch Knowledge Institute for Culture and Digitalization, and welcome to this session of the Eye in Archive. I will start with this introduction, and Guido will guide you through part 2 and 3. And in the end, we would like to start a conversation with you, and we hope that you have some questions and we offer some concepts we would like to get your input on it and see what your practice is. And so over the past decades, the GLAM sector in the Netherlands took some major steps in the field of digitalization and bringing their collections online. The Ministry of Culture started with funding the digitalization of important cultural heritage, objects and materials, like the audiovisual collections of the Dutch Institute for Sound and Vision and the Eye Museum. The digitization of major collections follow, like from the Royal Library, the Rijksmuseum, and many, many others. Within the Dutch Digital Heritage Network, national heritage institutes collaborate to develop standards and a shared approach in order to connect collections of digital cultural heritage and enable the use and reuse of digital cultural heritage for different user groups. These national institutes operate as nodes or sectoral focus points in this network, like the Royal Library with its collection of books and library and newspapers, the Dutch Institute of Sound and Vision with its archive of the national broadcasting and with radio and TV programs, and the National Archive and some other of these nodes. The knowledge, facilities and standards, etc. are shared within each of their respective sectors of heritage institutes. And then, as a knowledge institute, focuses on sectors like museums, but also on creators of culture, like in the performing arts. And the principles of the national strategy on digital heritage are basic guidelines for us and for all the activities DEN is working on. DEN offers programs within the DEN Academy on digital transformation. And with the impact of digital technologies on our society, cultural organizations are faced with new questions as well as new opportunities. At present, with COVID-19, new digital formats are developed as an alternative way to engage with the audience. You can follow live stream concerts, go on virtual guided tours, or contribute or participate in new interactive works of art. But that is just the start. In the cultural sector, the focus is on the production of the next performance. There is a limited interest in their role as producers of cultural heritage itself. A big difference with the GLAM sector is that makers of art don't work with collection management software. And talking about cultural heritage or digital sustainability are not catchy subjects. There is some misunderstanding what archiving is. In the performing arts, the archive is an active and ever-growing collection of artistic materials developed and expanded on during artistic and production processes. Archiving should be something like helping to organize all the information needed during all activities. And then the Knowledge Institute, collaborates with various theater and dance companies in organizing their work production and their work archives, and come up with user propositions to make better use of digitally born content during the phases of like artistic development, production, marketing, and performing. But how can companies in the performing arts make better use of their heritage and archives in general? How can this be used in telling new stories, in reaching out to the general public before, during, and after an event? And what materials and processes should be preserved? What challenges or lessons do they offer for the Cultural Heritage Institutes? These are topics DEN is working on. Guido will now present some cases of these archives of the future. Guido.
Yes, thank you very much, Marcus. I will take over from here. So first I want to start with a question to think about, like maybe some of you have already seen a live performance in a live streaming version. So I want you to recollect this experience for yourself, to think about what was it like for me to see this live performance through live streaming. Because I think we can see that there are very different ways live streaming is being used. And it sort of exemplifies how the performing arts in this particular time are looking and developing new ways of presenting their work. So before we can start talking about these new practices, I've got two cases that I'd like to show you. I think it would be interesting or good to highlight some characteristics that set the performing arts apart from the visual arts that also inform the way that they use digital environments. So first up is that the performing arts are mostly very process-oriented. As Marcus has already mentioned before, they are working towards the main event, the live performance, the premiere that is coming up ahead. And in this process-oriented way of working, there are also a lot of changes that can happen within the making process less than a week before the premiere. So it's a very iterative way of making art and the changing material. Another characteristic is that they are very event-based. They are all the materials that they make are surrounding or working towards the live performance and the tour that is going to take place. So a lot of artistic material that is part of their archives are supplementary to the main event. And lastly, there are the digital environments that when the performing arts move towards the digital environments, they usually use it as a place or a stage for paratext. Now, for the ones of you who are not familiar with the concept of paratext, paratext is a concept from literature, and it focuses not on the book, but it focuses on things surrounding the book, such as the cover or the back matter, what's on there, or reviews in books and newspapers about the book. So there are these kinds of materials that sort of shape or warm up the experience of reading the book. Now, in most cases, the writer of the book, him or herself, does not have full control on designing these paratexts, but instead it's a publisher or a reviewer who is in control of that. Well, with future archives and with younger makers and younger professionals becoming more and more used and accustomed to the digital environments and digital ways of working, they also regain the control over designing these paratexts. So future artists are writing their own paratexts using the eye of their archives, but I'll come back to that later. So with these three characteristics in mind, I want to zoom in on two cases, two developments within the performing arts right now. There are just two of many, there are a lot more, but these are two that highlight the focus on an archive very interestingly. First up is Katja Heitman with her project Motus Mori in Quarantaine. Katja Heitman is a choreographer, she's Dutch-based, and with her research Motus Mori, she is archiving movement material. So she is asking audience members to donate movements, and she will then have a movement interview with this person to first see what the movement is like, but also to collect the story behind this movement. Why does the person want to donate this? Or what does this mean for that person? When was the first time that this movement was being made, etc. And she gathers this material, she works with her performance on learning this material, and then she presents it live during a museum setting. But with the current COVID situation, museums have been closed earlier this year, and she was unable to perform live. But that didn't stop her from working on this research project. She moved to the digital environment with a supplement to the main work, Motus Mori in Quarantaine, where she devoted a part of her website to inviting the audience into her research practices and her rehearsal space, so to speak. So on the left, you see a still of her first video where she's introducing the project, and she's introducing to the audience members, like, this is the kind of material that we're working with, this is the way that we do it. And on the right, you see a still from one of the rehearsals that she then shares, where you can see that the performers are working on learning this movement material. So with Motus Mori in Quarantaine, she supplements the main event, her main performance. So she she allows us to get access to a layer of the work, a layer of the research that we normally won't be able to see if we just focus on the main performance, on the live event. So she uses the digital means as a way of providing additional context to her work. She uses the video platform Vimeo to do this. So she connects her website with an existing platform. Now, the second case that I would like to show you is this one from NNT, Club Guy and Roni, where Katja Heitman used existing platforms. NNT, Club Guy and Roni designed their own. They've designed the Night Hotel, which is a virtual theater. And in this environment, they've incorporated spatial elements to their digital design. In a way, they are copying the experience of going to a theater in this digital environment. And through that, they have the ability to show the Spada text that they also have, but also to create a sort of transitional experience that we would normally have if we go to the physical theater. I'm now going to quickly switch screens to the actual website so I can show you guys how that looks if you would go there. That's the wrong one. This is the one that I want to show. So this is how you would enter, and I am going to let Guy Wijsman, the artistic director of NNT Club Guy and Roni, introduce this environment.
So you got a link from us in your mail. It sends you to the nighthotel.org. That is where you will find our Swan Lake, the game. And I'd like to show you a little bit how to operate it now. I'm also just opening this now for the first time. So follow me. The first thing you do is after you click on the link, you choose a time slot and you click on it. And the first thing you see is 3 possibilities, 3 versions of Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 and 4. It's up to you to choose your own path in our game. I will now start with Igor, for example. I click on Igor, and then the world reveals itself, and you can start navigating using the arrows, either on your computer, the simple arrows that take you forward and back, or the arrows on your screen here taking you right and left. Other people are there as well. These are these fireflies flying around. These are other people that watch the performance together with you. You can't scroll forward and back. You have to watch it the way it's made, just like you would in a theater. Once the first act is finished, you will get a screen with a couple of questions. You will answer them, and from there on, the game will simply take you further. At the end of the whole journey, you get to choose what kind of end do you want to watch. Your decision also affects the performance live that the people in the theater will watch. We wish you a wonderful, adventurous Swan Lake.
So that was a brief introduction into this new space. In the screen, you can also see that they've sort of designed the space with the functions of an actual theater in mind. So on the left, you have the bar, where you could actually go to a virtual video chat room to engage with other audience members. And on the right, you can see buy tickets, where you can actually go to the ticket office to buy your ticket for the performance. And in the middle, you see Swan Lake, which is an invitation to enter the auditorium where the actual performance is going to be taking place. So they really thought about what is part of an experience of going to the theater, and how can we design a digital space that provides a certain mimicry of that. They also found ways to sort of supplement this experience to create a little bit more than just a theater space would be able to. And they did that through their hotel rooms. So if you go to a hotel room, you can pick one, and there you get a short introduction from the artist that is being presented here, and the kind of work or the kind of topics that this artist is dealing with. And if you then actually enter the room, you enter a sort of white cube, well, in this case, a black cube with white grid, where you can again navigate through to look at certain artworks that are being presented here. So in this way, they are sort of priming the experience of the main event during the performance by inviting the audience members to come about half an hour early to sort of like make that transition from daily life to the theatrical experience.
Guido, we have a question that's just come in that you might like to address. It's from Yasmin Beatrice Hansen, who's finding it hard to grasp exactly what this is. Is it a digital theatre, dance performance, video game, museum archive working with dancers, or all of the above, or a digital art space? How would you sort of define that? Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for this question. And I think all of the above is probably the more accurate description. So this is a digital environment that is being made by a performing arts company, centered around this main event of the live performance. But as you can also see with these rooms, it's creating more spaces to also present different kinds of works. The works that we see here are much more towards the visual art or sketches. There's another one that's really focused on poetry and monologues. So it's really a new digital environment that allows different ways of showing work. So that's when I connect back to the paratext. This is a place where the paratext surrounding a certain performance or a certain topic can be shared. Yeah, so with that digital space, there also becomes the opportunity to think about different ways of what you can present, what you would like to present. So I hope that's an answer to your question. Yeah, so I think I can leave it there for these two examples and move on to some observations that we have based on these. So as I mentioned before, the digital space is being used as an opportunity for paratexts while maintaining the event-based nature. So it doesn't replace the live performance. For example, what I just showed about Swan Lake, which is actually called Swan Lake the Game. You can also have a game version of this theater experience, but it's at the same time still being performed live. So when I buy a ticket, I still have to buy a ticket for a certain time slot during a certain evening. And during that same evening, the performance is being performed somewhere in the Netherlands. So it maintains this live aspect of performance. Heitman employs an existing platform, Vimeo, to do what she wants with it, whereas Club Guy and Roni designed a new space for their own ambitions. And that leads to this idea of a co-production, because they need a different kind of expertise, a different kind of knowledge within their company to be able to work and to design these spaces. But both of these digital spaces or digital environments showcase the signature of these workers, of these makers. So Katja Heitman uses the digital platform to show the signature of her research way of working, whereas NNT Club Guy and Roni show this as their sort of cutting edge ambitions, their desire for exploring things out of the box. Now, with these two cases in mind, I would like to make the transition to our proposal, a concept that we're working on, which invites us to think about an archive as consisting out of 3 parts. As you can see here, about the portfolio, the heritage, or the signature. Yeah, there they are. So to delve a little bit more into what we mean with these 3 terms, like when we talk about portfolio, we talk about a selection of work or pieces of material that represents the oeuvre of a certain artist. So it really goes back to the main event, so to speak. But it's a selection, so it's not the whole body of work, but it's highlighting certain themes or certain ways of working. There's already a selection involved there. When we talk about heritage, we talk about source of inspiration, references and influences, schools and lineages. In other words, external material that are not from the maker's hand themselves, but material that connects back to what informs the maker to make the work that they do. The other way around also works, of course, because the work that a maker makes might be heritage for another maker, another future maker. So it's also the contribution to the field and to other artists. Lastly, it's we talk about signature, which is about what makes the work of an artist so specific for their work, what makes them stand out from other artists. This could be because there's a certain way of making things. This could be in a certain art or style or ethics and aesthetics. It's moving outside of the main performance, but you can also see or think about how you can present a style or a way of working through marketing campaigns rather than just the performance. So there's a translation involved there. So together these three form the I in archive, the identity of a certain artist. And by proposing to think about it, an archive as consisting of these three parts, we can also think about how can we use these three elements to tell stories about the artist or to tell the story of the artist. How can we use these three categories to think about reaching new audiences? Within the performing arts, we are very often focused on the premiere, the performance event, but would it not also be interesting to share a little bit more about the heritage, about the works that came before and that informed this work? Would you then be able to reach different audiences, such as researchers or students or young professionals that are starting to make their own work? Same goes for portfolio. You can highlight different aspects of someone's oeuvre. And the signature is very directly a way of telling your story through different means. So this was a lot of information. I am going to stop sharing for now. I think this might be a good time to take a moment, like if there are any questions about clarification, about getting a little bit more information about what we just talked about, this is a moment, or otherwise we can move on to the discussion part that we would like to have with you, because we have prepared several topics and several questions that we would like to propose to you to start the conversation. So first off, are there any clarifying questions, things you would like to know a little bit more about?
No hands, no.
So that's good to hear. Then we can move on to the discussion part. And here we just want to start the dialogue with you, so feel free to engage. All right, so the first question we would like to sort of address with you is the kind of a big one. So we go straight into the depth of the conversation. So if identity of an artist consists of these three parts that I described before, the heritage, the signature, and the portfolio, how do you as an organization present an artist's work? Like, is there a particular part of these three that you focus on more than the other? And what other parts could you present? Is there perhaps any one of you that would like to share how your organization works with the work of artists?
In the meantime, Guido, there was a question in the chat. Maybe you'd like to address that. Pepine Lemons is saying that this is very interesting, but how can these more digital forms be funded? I think this question is, are funders prepared to pay extra for this?
That's a very good question. I'm also looking at Marcus here. These are indeed new big projects and undertakings. As I just mentioned with the NNT Club Guy and Roni, for example, it requires new expertise and new professionals within your team to work on this. So it's definitely a question of funding, about how can you make this financially possible as well. So what NNT Club Guy and Roni has done to sort of help with this is that they now have this platform, and they also are thinking about or looking for ways of how they can make this platform accessible for other parties as well. So in that sense, this new platform is for them also a new way of getting revenue, in a way of sustaining this platform. So that's one way you could look at it. Perhaps Marcus knows a little bit more about other opportunities.
Well, of course, we stimulate artists to do more than think about in a broader sense about digital. That's why we also mentioned the whole topic of digital transformation. And I think the challenge is of course like the idea of the concept that Guy Roney introduced, that you could create platforms and which would help also other artists to make use of these concepts. And like the question was on what are we looking at if we look at the Night Hotel or at this example, that you could also see that this could also be a way of presenting archival materials. So the challenge is to start collaborating and networking and come up with some bigger plans, and maybe also the need of innovation. And of course, yeah, money is key, but that also has to do to raise awareness also with the funding institutes to be more aware how relevant these developments are.
Yes, and to add to that, these two examples, so Katja Heitman as well, are for me very interesting examples because they show that artists, performing artists, are moving into different realms. They are making digitally born material that is a very key part of the work that they are working on. And future artists, as I mentioned before, being much more familiar with these digital environments and much more adept at picking them up and employing them, will continue to make more and more of this digital material. So the need for creating platforms or for using existing platforms to archive this work and to sustain it so that it doesn't appear in this whole digital ocean of information becomes an increasingly important question. So that's also where I would like to switch the question. So perhaps you, as a part of the GLAM sector, what means do you already have for archiving or preserving or presenting these kinds of digitally born material? Yeah, perhaps someone has an idea or already a project that works on that.
So we have a question or a comment, both, from Marco Denit. As a library, our digital services are very much based on digital and digitized items made findable through metadata. How did the three components that you talked about relate to such findability through metadata?
Okay. That's a good question. I'm trying to process this question for a moment.
I think our basic point is that it is very difficult if you're talking about performing arts, like I tried to mention in my introduction, that there's a completely different way of how a performing arts company or an artist is working. They don't make use of a one-way system to organize all their materials. So there is a basic need to help or to collaborate with these companies to come up with workflows in order to be able to store their own materials and their own developed materials and make it findable. And then, of course, metadata are very crucial. And we hope to raise some awareness with talking about with performing art companies to discuss and to make them realize that it is important to invest in their archive, to think about things like metadata, and be able to make better use of their own archive in order to present stories about their portfolio, about their signature and the heritage. So we're now working on to try to engage the dialogue and make them more aware. Instead of talking about digital sustainability, we try to stimulate them to think about the eye in the archive, to make an effort to be aware of how to organize their own materials and to structure their archive. And of course, then metadata is key.
Yes, for the performing arts, for example, it's a very simple thing to sort of think about actors, for example. I mean, it would be great if you could follow an actor's oeuvre through a sort of through metadata, because his or her name is connected to all the different kinds of productions. So it's also inviting performing arts to think about a different way of well, archiving the material that they have.
Marco has raised his hand. Marco, do you want to unmute and ask, say something?
Yeah, maybe that's easier if you can hear me.
Yep.
Good, thank you. To continue the conversation also like this, thank you, Marcus and Guido, for that. And Marcus, you said that, of course, you're in conversation with the cultural institutions to bring them a bit more towards, say, our ways of working. But what should we do to meet them halfway? So what can we do to make that connection stronger?
Well, that is one is to engage with us about our concepts. Well, we're looking at, that's what the question with Guido tried to start. So how does the model of portfolio, signature, and heritage resonate for, like, for instance, an archive or a museum who wants to highlight works on an artist on their own website? And the second part is that we're very much interested in tools used by archives and could also be used in the performing arts to help structure their materials. So what kind of systems are in use which also could be used by companies and artists in the performing arts? For instance, like a system to store your audiovisual materials, or
this
Okay,
might
thank
be,
you. Yeah.
Sorry, Marco. This might be, Pepin has asked a question which I think maybe is covering a little bit of the same ground, but how can GLAMs, galleries, libraries, archives, museums, assist performing artists in this quest? Are there tools, processes, best practices?
Yeah, yes, definitely. As Marcus mentioned, there because of because of the focus on this live event, this fleeting moment in performing arts, the focus on digital sustainability and archiving the material is very new idea. It's something that especially a lot of young artists are not necessarily working with yet. So as you mentioned, processes, best practices, tools for archiving all this artistic material that they're developing in the process could be very interesting and important for these artists to get familiar with and to develop expertise in.
And Micah has raised a question, not really actually for you, Guido and Marcus, but for anyone in the audience who works for a gallery, library, archive, or museum. The question here is if the digital structure in the GLAM sector is ready for these types of formats, materials, and stories, or should we develop a new structure, of course, with metadata and other components in place? It wasn't a question for you, Marcus, but maybe do you have a reflection on it?
No, I second that, of course. We're very curious about that's what we would like to hear now from the participants, if they have any experience with collecting an archive from the performing arts, or how do they make use of let's say our archive model. Maybe we could try to start up with our questions.
That's good. Is there any particular question that you'd like me to show, Marcus?
Well, I would be curious about the model of the IN archive. If there are any of the participants who have experience with highlighting a collection of an artist, and how they, what do they make of this concept of portfolio and signature and heritage? I would be curious if somebody wants to respond to that concept based on their own practice of their own institute or their own archive, presenting works of an artist. Is there somebody from the participants with a broad collection on artists, or maybe also on something related to performing arts?
Guido, there's a little bit of disturbance on your screen. If you close down the Zoom windows,
Yes.
it should allow us to see it again.
Yes.
Is there someone from the participants with an archive and a collection related to performing art, or to artists, or to maybe to some digital cultural artists? No? And then maybe it would be interesting, what is there any interest from your archive in collections like from the performing arts? I mean, this is the scope of our of this session, is trying to connect the worlds of archiving and the world of the performing arts.
Marco, you've raised your hand again. You can go ahead and unmute.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I've been thinking about these three. I think that signature is still very much quite at a distance from the cultural heritage domain, and maybe that's more something. If you look at how the archives work, you know, they have an institution that creates the archive and an institution that manages the archives. I think this is also what you've been talking about. So I find it difficult to connect from the perspective of my organization, which is a university library, to that element of signature. I think the other two are much more relatable to what we do. Maybe a question that I had was in heritage and sources of information. What would be some key actions we can do? Because we digitize a lot of our collections. We have about 500,000 objects from our library digitized, and we hope that others will be inspired by it. But that's something that we cannot really, well, we want to encourage that, but we don't really know how to do that with your target group. So what would be a good activity to spark that kind of inspiration with the things that we have digitized?
Well, what would be very interesting is there are a lot of professionals, of course, working in the performing arts, like Guido Jansen, who is also a dramaturg and a theater maker. So it would be very interesting how people like a dramaturg or a director or a choreographer finds inspiration and is in need of if he's doing a play, maybe they want to know more about the period in which the play is written or is set or whatever, or for people who make designs for the stage itself. So it's a very relevant user group of making use of heritage collections, and they're not really mentioned yet, I think, and I think they would be a very interesting user group, and they also could make in a very creative way use of these materials and using them maybe in the performances itself. So I think it's a great opportunity to link these two worlds.
We have another question here from Pepine Lemons. Would a model like ArtTube work for performing artists, where they create a channel where visitors can find a curated, metadated set of videos from various sources?
Yes. But it's only one platform. I think there are a lot of opportunities to come up with new I think there's a great need to develop new concepts of combining heritage materials, and like what Guido introduced is the paratext. There's a lot of content to be used to create that paratext for works of art.
I'm personally not very familiar with ArtTube, so I'm written it down, and I will definitely look it up to see what it is and how it can support or provide a platform for the performing arts. It is still a question on the other side of the spectrum as well, because performing artists would also need to think differently about presenting their work in a different platform. So, and that's where the signature comes into play again. So if you have a very particular way of working in live performances, you cannot, which works because there are bodies in the same room, then how can you have a similar experience when bodies are not in the same room? So, so ArtTube is then, I assume, literally a different platform that provides a space for some of these paratexts, but not necessarily everyone. But it's definitely interesting, something to explore, yes.
And an open question here from Christine. Couldn't documentalists and consultants in documentation play a major role to conceive and create such interactive projects by collaborating directly with web developers?
Can I ask the question poser to elaborate on the question?
I guess maybe what's missing there maybe is a little bit the role of the artist in that.
I think that would be definitely interesting and maybe also an important avenue to take. It's like the question that was asked earlier about the already existing archives and being able to access them as part of the inspirational material for performing art. So that also has to do a lot with making the material accessible in different ways. As you can already see with the example of the Night Hotel, where you see performing artists working with web developers to create this new environment. And they actually had an open call that went out for this Monday, where NNT Club Gaironi actively invited interaction designers and game developers to pitch a project because they are really thinking about using this new environment for different ways of disclosing their material, which is also maybe an interesting appeal towards the documentalists and the consultants on what material do you have and how would you be able to present that in other ways. Yeah.
Well, we are at 14:43 in Central Europe, so we're just very nearly at the end of this session. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Guido and Marcus from DEN Foundation. So we can all do a virtual round of applause. Thank you very much for this very thought-provoking session.